Hello, friends of Apogee and with Pilani. Hope you're having a great time. My name is Subodh. I'm a principal architect of a team called Customer Experience. And I thought I'll take a few minutes just to describe the awesome roles we have here in CX or customer experience. Now, if I take the context of Apogee, the tech fest you all are now immersed, CX pretty much resonates with that. So it's like the highest point of how do you perceive what Cisco is. So in short, customer experience is how our customers perceive all of our products, architectures, solutions, and the way in which we meet and help them solve their business problems. So it's a wide yardstick, I know, but the nicest way to think about it is it's both a huge team. It's a company within a company by itself. It's a philosophy aspect. And when I say a philosophy, I actually mean the way in which the diverse roles here are. So everyone's an engineer, yes, that much is a given. So whether you're from electronics, software, instrumentation, telecommunication, doesn't matter. You are an engineer. You have the ability to engineer a situation. So you can look at problems in all lenses. It's all about perspective, right? You either use it or you lose it. So customer experience has a bevy of roles. So when you imagine roles like, uh, am I just supposed to be someone coding or configuring a router, switch, gateway, or a controller? Well, no. There's a lot of diverse roles. So let's just for ease of understanding, let's think about this. What really happens when uh, a top-notch bank or a stock exchange or an internet service provider or a telecommunication company or a huge factory outlet or a logistics park or even a smart city goes online. So it has to rely on something what we call as a fabric or the network. And if you imagine the life cycle, right? For example, when I say life cycle, I mean the various stages through which it goes. Six stages come to my mind. So there's a planning stage, there's a preparation stage, there's a design phase, there's an implementation phase, there's an operate phase, and there is an optimize phase. So if you stitch together all of this, CX is the one responsible for making sure, it's like a continuous, if you imagine the infinity symbol, we are responsible for delivering a consistent experience throughout the entire life cycle. So we design, we implement, we troubleshoot, we maintain, we operate, we optimize, all of those things. So let's quickly slice it up. So in case you're wondering, what happens if I join CX? So in short, this is what happens. You are an engineer, that much is given. Now you also have to apply and keep one lens on what is the routing, switching, wireless, security, all aspect of it. So build on your foundations and then look northbound on where is the world going. So let me ask you this. How do you order food? How do you book a movie ticket? How do you plan your travel across cities? How do you experience something before actually going to the site there? The answer is pretty much obvious, right? You do it online. But all of this comes to us. We consume this online through minus application layer. Everything comes because it's software or whatever you call it as a services is delivered as a service to you. So the SaaS models here are very powerful. It embraces all aspects of our life. It would not be wrong to say, in fact, everything of what we do, right since the time we wake up, we consume either through a 14 of us or maybe a 16-inch screen of our laptops or our televisions for that matter. So whether we entertain ourselves, whether we research, write a journal or an article, whether we are looking at something to enhance our diet, wellness, and fitness plans, most of what we do, and this is not just a post pandemic context, yes, that has surely accelerated it, and we all know why. In fact, very life you all used to live as a student, uh, in-person immersion of actually going to a brick and mortar campus got switched to a hybrid or slash online mode, right, as a student. So you had your faculty, your professors and teachers engage and immerse with you. So education itself, you really abstract, was delivered as a service. So when you say it was delivered as a service, does it all only mean, you know, a 3-inch video screen and that's about it? No. So the whole thing's what you used to do: the transcripts, the journal, the practicals, the marking system, the attendance, everything also came with along with it as a service. So I just give you an example coming from the tunnel of the COVID pandemic. But imagine now everything. If you just sit back and ponder over how the country runs, and let's just take maybe banking finance, which includes banks, stock exchanges, insurance, fiduciaries, or let's take service providers, internet service providers, cloud service providers, application service providers, any service provider for that matter, right? Even media service provider. Everything comes as a service to you. You want to send stuff, any of your personal private stuff within the city, there are bundled service providers. So you could potentially piggyback on Uber, Ola, who might hitch a ride in that direction, and he carries your artifacts along with, right, in a secure, reliable, and a deterministic way. CX has roles which are so exciting, and I can go back in my 11 years as a CX, and it was fantastic. When I always used to imagine, hey, because I came from engineering, and it was always about I've developed this blade module, or I'm part of a team which has developed this platform. How do people perceive it? Uh, it's a firewall blade which goes and sits in a router or a switch. How do people deploy it? How would a bank deploy this 100 gig module? Which part of the data center would it go and sit? And hey, most important, what applications ride over it? So when you think about CX, as I told you, the vanilla version is yes, everyone's a consulting engineer. Right? You could say, I'm a consulting engineer, technical consulting engineer, or a software consulting engineer, or a security consulting engineer, does not matter. Oh, by the way, the 5 fundamental technologies, which I don't think anybody in Cisco can run away from, or rather, we all boast of them. So when you look at it, so we have enterprises, service providers, data center, security, and collaboration. When I say collaboration, I mean unified communications, everything around our WebEx, our MindMeld, the AI engine which drives WebEx. So if I do this, you see a thumbs up. If I do this, you understand I liked it. And if I smile, there is a face recognition. So AR, VR, and we have AI engines across, which means whether we're deploying network, routers, switches, controllers, and gateways, we have AI engines which exactly knows what's happening on each and every interfaces. So I'll change tracks a bit, and let's shift ahead from the platforms. And by now, I'm sure you have a very high level idea of what Cisco is. And my colleagues in engineering and digital enterprise solutions and service supply chain must have given you an idea. But CX and IT are together now, and so the roles here are very, very aligned precisely to make sure all engineers in CX, if you imagine the infinite life cycle, right? Just like a 8 flipped apart, the sign of infinity. So customers buy Cisco, and then everything, what happens on that experience is our responsibility. So we design, implement, maintain, troubleshoot, which is optimize and operate. So when you really break this down, there are fantastic roles in CX across technology. So when I say across technologies, when I say mass, mass scale infrastructure, which is really about building the internet of the future. So by now, most of you have heard, internet routers have blown apart the terabit space. So no longer are interfaces of routers, of the routers which drive the internet, looked upon as 1 terabit or 2 terabits. I think we left that long back. If you do a sigma of the total switching capacity of the highest internet router, people are touching almost half a petabyte, right? So more than 500 terabytes. They're already talked about 20 or 30 petabytes now. So just imagine, right? If you just imagine a router switching at that speed, what would be the engineering going on? So logical things for anyone who's designing or deploying it is, first of all, I have to know the product. What forms a good architecture experience? Why do we go to a coffee shop we love? Why do we book movie tickets in the same way we love? It's most seamless. Why do we embrace, cabs as a service or preferred operators only? Because the experience is exactly repeatable, same, and it is something which always meets the purpose and leaves a delightful sense of longing for more. So when we in CX plan and design, which is what we call as, so architect is really about, you have a solution and you have an architecture. For example, a bank would have a different architecture. The hardware, software is the same, but the architecture of bank would hinge on three very important principles. Security would be the top notch. They want security for their employees. They want security for their artifacts, which means the routers, switches, controllers, the hardware part. And most important, they want to reduce time and cost, which is a pretty much an expected ask. So they don't want to change something just because it has some higher speed. Why would I upgrade from a 80 gigabit interface to a 200 or a 250 gigabit interface, which is very hard to audit, let's say by the central bank or Reserve Bank of India. And suddenly I discover, this new switch does not support this API, and it's a big concern. So suffice it to say, when you architect something, it's like you architect your house, don't you? You build a strong foundation. You look at the soil structure. You look at where the strut would go. You look at the pier, the column, the shaft. If you're building a flat ground level house, you have to look at the expanse. What's the open space? What's the backdoor entry? How is your white picket fence going to go along? Similarly, when you architect a solution for a network, you apply the lens of first seeking from the customer. Let's say it's XYZ Bank. What would you like to do with the network? So, what's your intent with the network? Are you someone who's looking at retail, treasury, corporate, lending, hosting apps, and obviously being competitive because you all know the next startup or the fintech down the street could disrupt or eat into some of your business? So, how do you encapsulate all of that? So, there's a lot of advisory and consulting phase, as we call it, discovering the customer. This is a typical life cycle of an architect in customer experience, which you normally get to maybe after 7 to 10 years of working as an engineer, as a consulting engineer. You could be someone who really gets the code, right? We have various codes, all of them across written in C, C Bank, across our platforms. And these are all open source using RESTful APIs. So if you imagine you're someone who's very much an expert configuring a router and switch to meet the requirements for a bank or a telco company, you would configure that. If you're someone who has the knack of problem solving, you could join CX in a team called Support Services. The earlier name of that was called as TAC, Technical Assistance Center. Now, interestingly, for the last, I would say, 17 odd years, as far as I know, Cisco TAC is a brand by itself. I mean, people still swear by it, which is like the expert of experts. Those are like the top guns of people who are wired to look at a problem in a very simple, clear way. What's the problem? What has broken or missing? What can I do? And this is very important, in the most shortest time or in minimal time to get you back started. So it's like the top guns when it comes to troubleshooting. Some of our best Harvard case studies are written around how our support services or Cisco TAC was wired. And you can see I have a lot of soft corner, a lot of empathy for them because I really appreciate how they do it. My earlier life cycle stage in CX, was a stack engineer, and nothing, inspired or ignited me when we had those drawing boards. You could just imagine a ball like this, a softball, and topologies being just made. Let's just start creating this back-to-back connection. And once you draw it out and you're clear, one, two, three. Let me check the medium. Let me check the interface. Let me check the Q drops. Let me then do a packet sniffer into it. You just go or configure on your laptop, create a back-to-back simulated network, troubleshoot it, all the while when customer could just be on a call, seeing this on a screen. So we kind of embrace remote working, probably I would say 2 decades before even COVID occurred. Uh, TAC engineers, or you would say service support engineers in CX, have always been remote. Of course, we have partners who would go and actually come and do some troubleshooting locally for you. But those are Cisco partner employees. I'm talking about Cisco employees, full-time employees, right? Would intact would actually always be remote, and they always do a 24 by 7 by 365. So here's a high-level bulleted list, right? If I had to pick up the 3 top things of the support services engine called TAC, I would say they work 24 by 7 by 365. So look up wherever there's the sun shining, you would have the top guy, the best of the best, who would help you on the most complex of the complex issues. You need a hardware replacement? We don't question you. You are a trusted customer. We have the software processes in which, in less than 12 seconds, an order is placed, right? So we pretty much match up to the Amazon standards there for the industry. And we have our own service supply chain, which is more than probably $3.5 billion, depots around the world. So you get a part delivered either on the same day or within 2 or 4 hours or the next business day for your requirement, right? And this is all advanced hardware replacement. You don't have to worry about what happens to my old part. Whatever the new part comes in, there is a nice automated procedure which is entirely environment friendly. So think about support services as someone who's responsible for anything which goes wrong, emergency situations, mission critical outages, break fixing anything, optimizing it in certain measures. And then there is the other arm, right? So this is the arm when your runtime experience goes for a toss, right? So you're driving on the highway and suddenly you notice your car making or a tire making a wobbling sound. Imagine that's like a support service. Your experience of driving a car is compromised. We'll get it back. Now, how do I learn to drive the car? Am I driving on the right highway? Do I have the right map for me to get from point A to point B and then to point Z? So that's where professional services, or the earlier name was advanced services, comes in. So think about customer experience or CX as support services, professional services, cloud managed services, and even IT. And by the way, all 4 of these teams have coding engineers, have support engineers, have consulting engineers, have data engineers. So you start as an engineer, and then depending on what excites you, you can just move across. I think by now you're getting the drift. I'm really talking about one whole mini universe. So it's like one job, many careers. And you'll find something similar even in our engineering teams. Like you are either more on the security side, more on the service provider side, more on the data center side. So depending on what you like, in CX, you can go through various life cycle stages. So the title typically of CX would be, yes, an engineer, but then you could be a support engineer, you could be a consulting engineer, spend certain time. Consulting engineers, once you attain a certain degree of maturity and you have the technical horsepower, or as we call, as Batman, you're ready to take on, right? So you wear a utility belt, you're empowered, you can talk technology, you can breathe technology, you can code, configure, and optimize technology. On that sweet morning, you're ready to go what we call as on-site, which means you would shadow someone like a senior consulting engineer or a senior CX engineer. He or she would help you. For example, when I was shadowing my mentor, a senior engineer, consulting engineer, I was told that she is responsible for maintaining designing and implementing India's biggest stock exchange. So I saw how she was really going and gathering the requirements for upgrading their data center, let's say from this stage to this stage. And it was so nicely done. So it was all about show me how, show me where I need to go, right? So I'm here today. Let's just call it stage one. I need to go to stage five. Now, guide me from one to two, all the way to five. At each of these milestones, explain to me what it means for my teams. What happens to my networks team? What happens to my security, IT operations, application, cluster guys, my cloud automation AI guys? Where can they contribute? So the design, what we call as the high level design, comes out, the outcome in the discussions. And then we have a low level design, and then the implementation begins. So this would typically be maybe starting from 4 weeks, 1 month, all the way to even a 12-month engagement. We did for the biggest 4G operator right here in the world, in India. And that could be even, say, 100 consulting engineers like you, literally going and sitting on site. So consulting engineers and professional services get tagged to a project. You complete the life cycle for which you are responsible. So you could be planning, preparing the design. You could be making sure the design is in line with the global best practices. You could be someone who is solely responsible for the automation part. And that's where software-defined networking, network function virtualization, your 5G, 4G, LTE, cloud automation frameworks, your AI ML frameworks, which can then work with AI for security, AI for 5G, AI for security, and cloud automation could come into place. So yes, everyone is an engineer. Everyone needs to know coding in some aspects. Everyone needs to understand SDN. That's where the future is. It's all going to be software-defined networking, where the infrastructure is southbound, the applications are the outcome, and in between, you have the secret sauce, which is your SDN controller, which is completely decoupled and decentralized. If you're wondering why, look at how the world has shifted from 3G to 4G and beyond, LTE advanced, and now more than 80 odd operators in the world have embraced 5G. Who do you think is building the internet of the future? Who do you think is ensuring that your hybrid work, life, education, campus experience is intact? So safe, reliable, and scalable. Who do you think is driving the engines of manufacturing, the factory floors, the utility, the smart grids, the sustainable smart communities we are talking about? Who do you think is making this whole world a secure and a decentralized way in which your data and privacy rights are not compromised? That's the future of what CX roles could afford you. And you go and pretty much touch each architectures. So whether you're talking about AI operations, whether you're talking about full stack observability, you're responsible for the full stack, the physical or the virtual infrastructure design, the controller design, the application design. You're responsible for the full stack and providing insights and actions. And that's something which is phenomenal. I think if you just draw a nice curve and say, you start here in CX, get on the racetrack, right? So that's your infinite loop going on. You would start enjoying the ride. So on that note, I would say, make a serious attempt, right? Make a serious attempt. What do you want to do with your life? Do you want to make a dent in the universe when it comes to 5G cloud automation? Do you want to make a dent in the universe when it comes to AI ML frameworks driving everything? Do you want to be the next person who can look at, I know 5G will bring a lot of environmental issues. I think there is merit in ensuring that every router and switch coded by Cisco does not leave a huge carbon footprint. You could be that guy. You could be the guy designing a sustainable and a scalable planet for all of us to live on. Welcome to CX.
Cisco, the bridge to possible.